Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Boogie Board Tiki Bar. Today, I am joined by George Lagone from Chicago. He is a partner at Revenue Shift, and I know he's extremely busy with Q4. So, George, I really appreciate you making time to talk to us today.
Yeah, Kevin, thanks for having me on.
How is the fall season in Chicago? Has the weather turned yet? I see you have kind of like a light, warm jacket on, but nothing too serious.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I feel like as the years go on, we get more and more California-like weather in Chicago. So it's been a long fall, a long golf season. All of that is helpful to tolerating the upper Midwest.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. Now, I always like to kind of get into the origin story before we get into, where you are today. So if I'm talking to a 10 or 15-year-old George, were there already signs that you were going to be a partner in a consulting firm down the road, or were you trying to be the, Chicago Bears running back? What was the plan?
No, no. Yeah, when you top out at 5'7", you figure out real quick that the pro sports things aren't really going to happen. I did have, I would say some combination, like call it commercial and technical aspiration early on in education and career. It always liked math, always liked science. Was drawn to that. Went to a high school that was really heavily into it too, as well as was kind of my friend group. So kind of knew pretty quickly that something analytical was going to be in my future. It was just a matter of what. Back then too, which is actually probably late these days. Was investing in seventh and eighth grade, which is probably like not that uncommon now with Robinhood and everything. But I think back then when you were still calling the Schwab 800 number, it was a little bit different.
You were the original crypto kid. Any memorable investments or stories from that part of your journey?
It was Intel super early, and wish I would have held on to that for years after. But that was yeah, Intel 91 was probably the best buy and the worst sell ever. So
Well, it's good to know that the analytical bone was working within you. Sometimes we learn more from the losses. When you do go through school, you then go to college, and I see that you actually started in sales, carrying a bag for a little bit. Can you tell us how that happened?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I went to school for computer science, graduated in '02, kind of dead in the middle of the Web 1.0 tech meltdown, 99 to '02 in there. I mean, there were just no tech job offers on the table out there.
Mm.
So people were kind of taking what they could get. I originally worked in tech support for a little bit, for a few months, but then for about a year there, went into sales, held the bag, worked for one of the biggest staffing companies in the world. Is one of the divisions of Robert Half, and was really like boiler room style. I mean, dialing for dollars type of sales. Very formulaic. Connect with, make X amount of calls, you get Y amount of connects, you get Z amount of client visits out of that, which produces a given amount of sales, right? So high volume, really interesting though. Makes you really resilient. You get immune to no, if people even pick up in the first place. So was kind of great training for dealing with clients, talking to people, and being involved in sales in general.
Where were you at mentally with your? I mean, you're really young when you're doing that, but as
Yeah.
your kind of career arc is starting, I remember when I was a business development rep and I started doing those dials. I was like, okay, what did I do here?
What I get
What
into.
kind of what kind of path am I on right now? I'm curious if you had any of that, or you were able to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
No, no, I had plenty of that. I was still kind of close enough to my undergrad that I was still trying to get into a technical role, right? So it was a bit of a placeholder for me, but it was a great year of additional education, really.
Mm.
But ended up going and working at Accenture, kind of as the job market thawed a little bit and heated back up. It went into IT consulting and technical consulting.
And I saw that you caught on at Accenture. You had a
Yeah.
successful career at Deloitte as a consultant.
Yep.
At what point in your career as a consultant does it click? Are you saying like, okay, this works for me?
Yeah, it was actually kind of it was a bit of an out and back for me. I not long after business school, like you said, went to Deloitte. I worked at ZS a couple of years. I was a little bit burned out on consulting. It had been a long run in it at that point, kind of from 12 years straight or something at that point. And went into industry for just a few months. Um, Really wasn't the place I worked. I won't name them, but it wasn't a terribly dynamic organization. It went back to consulting at a different firm. I think had a bit of a new lease on life with it, and
Yeah,
it was taking skills I had learned from at a bigger firm and places where it's more of a machine. The talent development is very regimented. You know kind of what the partner path looks like, and you almost forget how much expertise you've developed. And
yeah.
then so took that from bigger firm to mid-sized firm, and it was really great to realize like, oh, I've developed like expert level knowledge in something, and I can really start to flex and be the first person that talks in client meetings and be the point of contact and not just sit back and wait for partners to run their mouth. So that was it was kind of actually taking that break was really confidence building for me.
That's interesting. What was the process like of understanding that and then being able to take that into action? I think oftentimes there's this barrier to some of these people that have all of this in their head. But then in the consulting world, you really have to productize your knowledge and kind of be able to
Yeah.
chunk it out in digestible ways for someone who's not coming at it from the same angle as you. So what was it like to understand you're the expert, but then figure out how to get that expertise into the minds of others?
Yeah, it's a couple of things happened for me. I think one, getting in touch with the level of expertise that I had and understanding that I had really learned a lot. Actually worked with a career coach to kind of
Hmm.
do that, and it was again great exercise for me to kind of build confidence and realize that yeah, you didn't like consulting where you were, but you are a consultant, so find somewhere that matches you, and
Hmm.
really did. So that was kind of on a macro level, one part of it. Um, the second part of it, as far as like being able to like productize your expertise and give that to people, uh, was honestly getting more specialized, right? I kind of worked at bigger firms, broader projects, that might have multiple work streams and things like that, to where the place I ended up, where I kind of fell in and fit in best, uh, was was really pretty narrowly focused, similar to what we do today, sales effectiveness wise at Revenue Shift, but was focused on an even narrower set of problems, of which I had pretty deep expertise in, and was really able and willing to share that expertise. It was smaller. It tended to be smaller, more focused projects too. Um, so you kind of weren't as affected by other things going on with the client. It was really about you, this job in front of you, and getting the best value and the most knowledge across to the client. So when you're in like kind of that focused of a column, it's much easier to. It was much easier for me to be full go.
Ah, I love that. I love that the depth and that specificity. And it sounds like you also took to the category itself. So how
Yeah.
do you define for those that don't know what is sales effectiveness?
Yeah, it's really kind of a combination of things. It's very much related and really close to sales operations. It is what you'll see. A lot of the things that we cover in our stack line up really, really well with the sales ops function at a big company. How we describe ourselves typically, though, is we really help companies refine and implement and improve all of the things that operationalize their go-to-market strategy.
Mm,
So if you kind of get right below what the GTM strategy is, thinking of account segmentation, looking and sizing your addressable market, organizing your sales force, designing sales roles, deploying and sizing it, blocking and tackling sales things, so comp, quotas, territories, and then all the change management, communications, documentation that's related to that. That is, in a nutshell, what we do. We really try to also take a data first approach to it. So the bulk of our staff, of our consultants, are kind of classically trained data scientists, right?
Mm.
Not the partners so much. I'm technical enough to be dangerous these days, but have nothing on what our consultants do.
Oh, that's awesome. So how did Revenue Shift actually get started?
Yeah, it was really so. Some of those people that I got together with when I worked at a smaller place, in the smaller place, it was actually Corn Ferry, which is not a small place. But our practice, right, the Enterprise Sales Effectiveness Group, it was pretty small, right, and pretty narrow. And the consulting side of Corn Ferry does a lot of org transformation,
Mm.
compensation type consulting. We were kind of this little niche practice that was in it. My two partners right now at Revenue Shift, I met both of them there. Is how we got this started. Our careers kind of continued on different paths for a number of years. That was back in 2017. So about 7 years ago. One of the three of us stayed there the whole time up until now. Another one, Tom Hill, went from Corn Ferry to Axiom Lotus Blue, and then started Revenue Shift. I also went to Axiom Lotus Blue with Tom. I spent time at Fiserv on the corporate side as a director of sales compensation. Double back and kind of got the band back together about 18 months ago to start the new firm.
And what's the impetus for, hey, we're ready to go out on our own? I mean, obviously, you all have successful careers at
Yeah.
this point, but still, the entrepreneurial journey forces a lot out of you. And so I'm curious, what was like the moment where it was like, all right, hey, let's do it?
Yeah, it was one of those things. I think a lot of times the practice that we have, I think there's a lot of firms that have a practice that what of what we do. There's not many that have it in mass. And it tends to be a really small tuck in a much larger practice to where you kind of get overlooked to a large extent, right?
Interesting.
When we were, for instance, at Corn Ferry, we are a $10 million practice in a multi-billion-dollar consulting organization.
Mm.
We can't get marketing support. We can't get talent acquisition support. We're bootstrapping we're bootstrapping within a really large company because you just can't get resources allocated. So a big part of what we wanted to do was say, hey, if we took this, focused on this solely, how much could we push our brand into the marketplace with honestly relatively little dollar amount investment? And just how much can we push it? How much can we build that brand? How much more exposure can we get when we were actually hamstrung by the larger orgs
Mm.
that we worked for? That was one of the biggest things why we want to go on our own.
So when you're going out and pitching clients, I'm curious, what are the types of things that you hear that perk your ears up when customers might be ready for sales effectiveness support from Revenue Shift?
Yeah, and I always tell people this. A good amount of what we do is sales compensation planning, sales compensation planning and strategy work. Very, very often, the first thing that someone comes to us with is a comp problem, right?
Mm.
It's either, George, I am paying too much for the sales results I'm getting, or I don't know how much I should be paying people. What should I be expecting? What should quotas be, right? I don't know if should I be hanging $2 million or $10 million on each of my reps? Um, Questions like that, when people are concerned with either the cost or the performance they're getting for a given cost,
Yeah.
tends to be the first thing that comes in the door. And I think that heads of sales ops are always concerned with this. Heads of total rewards are always concerned with this. It's when it comes from a CRO, a CFO, a CEO, when the problem has risen to their desk, it's typically go time then
Mm.
that we need some additional help on this.
What types of problems do you see that are continually occurring that, you've probably been talking about how to fix for a number of years now and maybe make you want to pull your hair out?
Yeah, yeah. Um, there's a few. The one that's kind of we're dealing with the most right now, and this is anyone who's SFE consultant or sales comp consultant will empathize with this. Um, Trying to really do too much with the single sales population, maybe a homogenous sales population that was largely largely tasked with account management previously,
Hmm.
and then executive management wanting to turn them into a hunter
Yeah.
role just using compensation. It's like, yes, money's a motivator out there. Money can't fundamentally change the way people work or what they're skilled at, right? They look at it like this is sales. These are just salespeople. It's like that's a way too simplistic way of thinking of your commercial workforce, right? Um, there are people who are hunters by nature and are great at it. There are people who are account manager and relationship people and great at maintaining, expanding, upselling, cross-selling business by nature. You need both of them on your team and you need to compensate them properly. Trying to shove in some incentives into an account management plan is not going to turn that AM into an AE. That is thing number one, right? And it's a hard truth to swallow because honestly, if you take that to heart, that means you are probably going to the market and hiring new people. You're developing new roles. You're changing your org chart. You might be adding management. It's not a small thing. When I talk about it, it sounds a bit trivial. I fully understand the downstream ramifications of saying, okay, we need to split this out. We need to create a new company, new target hunter population. That is not a cheap or easy thing a lot of times.
Yeah,
So
we
that
see that.
yeah, I was gonna say
That's one.
I could keep going. So
Please, I'm
yeah,
good for another one. I mean, that one
yeah,
resonates. I'll pause there. I'll just say that one resonates with me,
yeah.
because we do territory design,
Right.
and so you hear companies, we're thinking about switching this model to this, and it's like, well, while I believe fundamentally that you can stretch people to do different things if they're up for it, if they didn't sign up for that job, I don't think it's going to work. And so I tend to agree with you there. But you mentioned you might have one more. What else is something that you're seeing that's making you pull your hair out?
Yeah, the other big one, it's not just making me pull my hair out, but also our clients. That's really tough. Is this shift to consumption based pricing in
Yeah,
technology and compensating people on that well and effectively. Um, Everyone wants it comes to me and is sort of like, hey George, how do I do this? And it's like, well, which bad option do you want? Right? Is kind of the like you're not gonna like anything I say because you've been used to copying people in a SaaS style model for years now.
yeah,
That is not what this is, right? And this is honestly kind of moving it to me. It feels like it's kind of moving back to 1970s, 1980s, like widget sales and comping people on volume that's coming through the door. Now, what else this does is since there's not the recurring revenue stream that's kind of coming down that you're used to with SaaS and having sticky revenue, is people want to stick around more at clients. I sell something, they have to continue using it for me, sales AE to get paid. I don't want to leave and drop this to an AM, right? Like I'm staying here to make sure my commissions keep coming, make sure the client is happy, etc. So I don't know that I've seen this happen a ton yet, but it almost feels like we've gone through now, call it 35 years of sales role disambiguation and specialization, and is this shift to consumption based sales going to collapse that back on itself, where people are going to want to hang on, want to be the AE, the SC, and the AM all in one because my pay depends
So
on
is
my
your
job.
prediction? I mean, I worked at Google Cloud for like 7 years,
Yeah.
and so we were meter based billing people like pretty early. and they had no idea how to pay us
Yeah,
when it all started. They got very sophisticated by the end, but it was always the comp document was just like I mean, it's a huge company, but it was so long.
it's
And the
massive.
irony was that later on in my journey, I was structuring the contracts to some of the largest clients, and all of the largest clients would take this consumption based billing and they would say, no, we need predictability, right?
Right.
And
You want
so
the
they end up structuring those contracts to kind of backdoor it into more of a legacy IT contract with
yeah.
higher predictability for their financial teams. So is your prediction then that the seller of the at least near future with consumption based billing companies will morph into more of this kind of generalist role who sticks on, hangs on at the company and tries to get more volume out the door?
Yeah, honestly, I think so. I think that's it. I don't think I'm making a groundbreaking prediction in that the incentives are going to drive the behavior is going to drive the role design, right? And I think it's going to be a bit of uh, a natural way for it to move. Is it going to happen in mass or quickly? Probably not. I mean, we've created 40 years of commercial structure here, right?
Yeah.
So until you get really big companies, really specifically tech, um, shifting to consumption based billing, which I think you're seeing some of it, right? But I don't know that there's enough that everyone is going back to what's essentially back to selling up software in a box, right? And selling you a CD that's a license. When we get there, I'm guessing we'll see more of what I just described.
Wow, that's really interesting. George, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk through your journey and some of your observations. In the show notes, we will post a link to revenue shift. If you've got a comp plan issue, or if you've got any of the things in the world of sales effectiveness that George was talking about here today, please hit him up. Please hit me up, and we'd love to do this again sometime, George.
Kevin, thanks for having me on. Anytime.
Perfect. We'll talk to you soon.